Hey everyone, welcome to today's video. Welcome to the Gamey Daddy channel. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today we're going to be looking at Massive Ubisoft, kind of taking a page from their history of making the Division games, and also how I believe people are perceiving their next venture with the Star Wars games, and why I believe some of those assumptions or preconceived notions may be slightly off unless we look at the picture from a place of the historical side of things, from both the development of the Division games and what Star Wars could be about. Now, before I jump into this video, I want everyone to know that just recently, probably maybe a few years ago, I think I got to the point where I could call myself a Star Wars fan. I used to be more of a Trekkie, if you get what I mean, which I still enjoy a lot of the Star Trek universe, but it wasn't till something basically changed and shifted that I started to see myself as somebody who could appreciate some of the Star Wars aspects for what it was. And what I mean by that is it's not necessarily, kind of that, big Star Wars fan that everything Star Wars I'm all about. No, not necessarily that. It's the fact that there is a complex nature to the Star Wars franchise and to the storytelling. So let's go ahead and set this up. So when Massive Ubisoft or Ubisoft, whoever they were, decided that they were going to announce that, Massive was working on a Star Wars game, seemed like a lot of the community of Division players pretty much checked out. They were like, man, this is not something that I wanted. I'm not really a Star Wars fan. It's not a game that appeals to me. And that's actually very understandable. Star Wars, even though it seems to have a huge wide following, it also doesn't appeal to a lot of people for many reasons. And even for the longest time, it never appealed to me on any front. I remember somewhere around 2012 or so, there were a lot of people saying, yo, you got to watch the Star Wars movies. And I remember I'd seen scenes from them, and I never really thought that they were interesting enough for me to bother with, but at the same time, I think it was during the Christmas season. So I said, well, I'm on holiday. Let me go ahead and watch these movies and see what everybody was talking about. So I watched them, and lo and behold, I was not impressed. I was quite disappointed with episode 1 through 6. Don't tell anybody that I said so. For somebody who's saying that they're a Star Wars fan saying something like that. But at the end of the day, I think that was one of those things that just made me go, well, maybe this is not for me. I still prefer the new generation Star Trek, with the movies that were brought out in 2009. I think 2000 and I don't remember when the other one came out. But, sadly enough, they've not followed through because of all kinds of weird issues with Fox and all the people that own some of the rights here and there. And so that's kind of where I just kind of park my bus, But at the end of the day, I wasn't necessarily kind of one of those big fans that jumps into the whole thing until somewhere around a few years after that. I had this job where I worked from home, and I was always on a computer. So from time to time, I would just play TV shows and listen to them while I worked. There's no way I could watch those shows. I had daily tasks and I had daily metrics that I had to meet. So I just have those shows playing in the background. It just kind of, made it not seem so quiet. And it was really interesting that as I started to do that every day after work, I would listen to this one show that was a very nerdy show called Numbers. And then after work, whenever I was chilling in the evening, I would watch Clone Wars, because I thought, I want to watch a cartoon. I wonder what cartoon would be there. And believe it or not, it was a cartoon animated series that actually did it for me. And over the course of the past few years, I've been watching the Clone Wars and just, walking myself through the episodes from time to time. And it's been interesting as to why that was much more attractive to me. And I think I finally have nailed down some of the pieces. You see, the Clone Wars actually is not necessarily all about animation when it comes to the episodes and the seasons and the series. This is not the Clone Wars movie, by the way. They're different in a sense. It's more of the narrative and the storytelling of what the Clone Wars actually have brought to the table. And from that way, I went from the Clone Wars, not just, enjoying that aspect of things, but to coming back later and appreciating the Star Wars universe in general. That's where I kind of saw I would say, genius and expertise in storytelling that the writer and or creator of Star Wars and subsequent writers and subsequent producers had brought to the table. Now, you can argue about the validity of the other movies, the Jedi movies and all of that stuff. You can argue about their authenticity and all of that. Those didn't even really appeal to me because they weren't even too deep in their storytelling. They were more like fanfare. And so coming from that Clone Wars side, which I'm more of a new Star Wars fan, I really did appreciate a lot of the story elements. The Jedi, the other tribes, the other worlds, the other peoples that were all involved in this huge, massive galaxy of narratives narratives and storytelling. It was such a big deal. And so when we heard the news that Massive Ubisoft was going to be making a Star Wars game, it was a double whammy for me. And I thought to myself, I wonder what people are going to think about this Star Wars game. And I think, it's not difficult for you to be able to see what they think, especially if you've played the Division games and you've been basically in that community for a long time. I think many people, presume that they might see some of the looter shooter elements. Some people presume that they might see a game that, doesn't necessarily have a strong plot line. I mean, the Division has a decent storyline, a very good narrative, but it's not the strongest in the world. So people don't necessarily know how Massive Ubisoft is going to treat, this opportunity to make the Star Wars game. But I think from some of the information that we already have, I think I can tell you how this thing's going to go. So there's right now on YouTube, I think it's been there for about a year, a 1-hour documentary on the production of Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order done by EA Studio Respawn. And this was where Respawn basically started making this game before EA bought them out. So they were their own independent studio and they got the opportunity to, I think, develop the game maybe for EA. Under EA needed somebody that had the expertise. So I think they probably were going to be contracted out, and then over the course of that development there was a deal where there was a merger of some sort. And one thing that I noticed throughout this documentary was, as the developers were making this game, they had consultants from Lucasfilms literally walking through a lot of the themes and a lot of what they were going for with them to ensure that this particular game was authentic to that storytelling strength of what Star Wars is. I don't think this would be an easy venture. I mean, now in the documentary, it was portrayed as, oh yeah, these guys, we love working with them. They kind of keep us on pace. But honestly, as somebody who is not a 5-year-old, I saw this as they probably were breathing down their neck almost all the way through. Now, that must not have been the case. I'm just being overly exaggerative in a sense. I'm just maybe, blowing it up, all the way. But I can see how that shows how well protected and how well valued the Star Wars franchise is. It's not something that somebody just wakes up in the morning and says, we're going to do a Star Wars theme. And even now that you have, Disney in the picture, it may even be much more of that. And I think this may also be the case with the Avatar, IP that they're working on as well. Maybe they might have a little bit of freedom, but I think even with that IP, they probably have some plot lines that are available to them to be able to pursue to represent the movie. A lot of these things are going to kind of, in a sense, depend on, what the teams in terms of the narrative and the cinematics are quite comfortable with when it comes to how they actually expose the game to audiences. And I remember even, the writers talking about having, to write their own portions of the game and to create the stories and all of that stuff, and how with Lucasfilms they were basically kind of going over different things and different themes, even to the point where in one part of the documentary one of the Lucasfilms executives said, this color that this person has, are you able to change this color to make it look a little bit more I was really shocked to see that. And even another one was like, this design here, and they provided feedback. Now, at the end of the day, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order to me was a solid game. So I can't say that there was no benefit to that collaboration. It felt very Jedi-like. It was a Jedi game at its core. And for somebody like me who came into the Star Wars aspect of things, especially from looking at the Jedi story and the way that's been set up, it was a perfect game, to be able to engage in. Now, another thing, too, is there are people who also have been in the Battlefront series, the multiplayer, those other games. I have not played many of those other games. The only other Star Wars game I have played, I think from beginning to the end or so, is Force Unleashed. And I can't even remember if I played the first or the second one. But, I own them now. I went ahead and got them. But it's been interesting to kind of see, what the different Star Wars communities are basically pining for and what they expect. And some people expect maybe a multiplayer, some sort of an RPG, some sort of an MMO style game, like some of the other games, that you have that are basically old school games. I have some friends that play. I can't remember the one. You see, I'm kind of new to this. This is how fresh I am in this stuff. I don't even remember a lot of these things, but it's just exciting nonetheless. So I think the attitude that I have towards this, it might be different from other people, is I'm going to be diving in, having, started to enjoy some of the Star Wars lore. It's interesting to see how things will go. And then finally, I think what kind of sealed and topped all of this stuff off was just The Mandalorian, a Western written in Star Wars. Now, for many of you who, basically enjoy Westerns, you've probably watched The Mandalorian. And if you haven't and you enjoy Westerns, then you're doing yourself a disservice pretty much. I mean, I've seen some people in my family who are like, yeah, we love Westerns, but we haven't seen The Mandalorian. And I'm like, you what? So it's really interesting to kind of see that dynamic as well. So I've basically sold it to them and they're going to be watching it. So there are many things involved in all of this. And if you have to think about this whole franchise, you have to think about it from the entertainment side and then think about it from what the game development side will look like. And this is exactly where I think the development of this game is going to have to go. It's an open world game. That's the very first part that we know. But I genuinely think that the second part, which is a narrative that will complement this in quote open world game, will have to be strong. And Lucasfilms is going to have a hand in the production of this game. I mean, a very significant hand in basically ensuring that this does not become some kind of a weird game. I think after EA's Battlefront 2 issues and how they decided to try to hyper monetize the franchise, I think Lucasfilms has basically taken a different step back towards how they're going to be letting their own intellectual property out into the hands of a game developer. So I think these things can be tampered down, and we're just going to have to wait to see a full fleshing of what this is going to be all about. But that's pretty much my video, folks. I want to hear your thoughts in the comment section. Do you think that you would engage in a Star Wars game being made by Ubisoft Massive, especially if you're a Division player? This question is directed specifically to you. I mean, and if you are, let me know in the comment section. And if you're not, also, I'll be interested in knowing why. I mean, if you have the time to do so, talk about it in the comment section. Talk to you all soon. Peace out.